Every year, on my birthday, my father never fails to remind me that the day of my birth was, quote, the worst day ever. You see, I was born on September 12, 1996, in Erbil, Iraq, the capital of the autonomous region of Kurdistan. In the weeks that preceded my birth, fighting had broken out between two rival Kurdish political factions, and with an opportunity to regain territory in northern Iraq, then dictator Saddam Hussein had allied himself with one faction and sent thousands of troops to attack Erbil, my birth city, putting all of our lives in grave danger. This August 31st attack on Erbil stoked American fears that Saddam would be launching yet another genocidal campaign against the Kurds, one similar to his Enfad campaign of 1988, where upwards of 5,000 Kurds were killed and as many as 10,000 were injured in a 5-hour chemical attack. Now, to make matters worse, on the morning of my birth, a decree was released that declared that all internationals must leave the city and stated that any Kurd caught working with an American or any other international organization would be killed. My father describes the morning of my birth as one of total and complete darkness. The city was on curfew, there was no electricity, and that very same morning, his coworkers had informed him that their organization was one of those that would be leaving. So with a lost job and an increased risk for death, you could say things were pretty bad. And as my mother's water broke later on that evening, things quickly progressed from bad to worse. But from that nightmarish day did emerge a brighter tomorrow, one in which promises were kept and American dreams were in reach. Through Operation Pacific Haven, my family was one of over 6,000 Kurds who were evacuated from Iraq, processed in Turkey, and airlifted to Guam to await approval for asylum into the United States of America. When we entered the country, we were greeted by numbers of Americans who came and welcomed us into the community. We survived and thrived with assistance from nonprofits like Catholic Charities, who helped us in the resettlement process, and World Relief, who paid for my parents' medical exam licensing fees, and the Alliance for African Assistance, who provided us with secondhand furniture and toys, even though we weren't Catholic or African. And with all their assistance, we were able to firmly plant our seeds as U.S. green card holders, and later, U.S. citizens. My family's story is not a unique one. It's a template for the American dream. Whether it was my father or your father or his father's father, in most of our family histories, someone had immigrated to this country. Someone had built a bridge to the unknown. And I wish that I could end on this positive note, but there is so much more left to the story. On the day before my 5th birthday in 2001, thousands of innocent American lives were taken by the atrocious actions of terrorists who not only hijacked airplanes, but also hijacked the dominant narrative of a faith peacefully practiced by 1.8 billion across the globe. I never got a chance to get to know the world before 9/11, but I've become intimately familiar with the post-9/11 world that we all now reside in. We started labeling quickly, us versus them, and suddenly them became anyone who looked different, talked different, dressed different, or practiced faith differently. It wasn't restricted to only those who were responsible for the atrocities committed. And it wasn't long before I had my first encounter with hatred. I was 7 years old. My parents had enrolled my sister and I in a Muslim summer camp. And for the first half of summer, things were awesome. Camp was like 95% fun outdoor activities, 5% classroom theology, and that was a balance I could get behind. Because my parents had to be at the hospital early in the morning, my sister and I were always the first ones dropped off at camp. And typically the drive to the school which housed our camp was a quiet one. But on that July 2003 morning, the silence of the early hour was punctuated by sirens. Police cars and news crews had lined the streets up to the school which housed our camp. And squarely on the lawn before our entrance building stood a tall wooden cross, drenched after having been set ablaze some hours before in an attempted hate crime. When we returned to camp weeks later, we had to talk about hatred. We had to understand where it came from, what it meant. We had to have these difficult conversations as children. And for me, at least, those conversations still haven't ended. In my high school government class, my teacher decided to share his insights regarding the conflict in the Middle East. The title of his presentation, Why Do They Hate Us? It was this us versus them narrative again. I put up with the not so funny jokes of my classmates. Why do your people hate us, Sarah? Geez. If you don't like it here, why don't you just leave? As a high schooler, I wanted so badly to be a part of an us, to fit in and not feel like an outsider any more than I already felt like one. But as I came into college, I became comfortable with my differences, and I actually began to embrace them. When I first took on the role of president of my university's Muslim Student Association, I anticipated working on bake sales and international festivals and the occasional informational booth or two. But what I had not anticipated was the sheer amount of emotional baggage that would come with the position. Attacks on foreign soil in places like Paris and Brussels felt visceral even for us living in parts of rural Appalachia. With each incident, the cause for concern was growing. The concern for safety was unanimous, Muslim or non-Muslim. We were all worried. Were we safe? But that response of hatred that was brewing overseas led to another amount of hatred here at home. The Pew Research Center reports that between the years of 2015 and 2016, assaults against Muslim-identifying individuals surpassed the modern peak of 2001. In 2016 alone, there were 127 reports of aggravated or simple assault against Muslims, compared to 91 the year prior and 93 in 2001. These statistics are alarming. But worse even is that these incidents are happening in our backyards, in our own home community. In a campus climate survey conducted by WVU's Research Center on Violence, 28% of respondents reported an atmosphere of unfriendliness towards Muslims on campus. And 30% of respondents reported that they had experienced a verbal hate or bias-motivated assault. And for those of you who prefer story over statistic, on a brisk Sunday in the fall of 2016, my junior year, I received a phone call from an unknown number and let it go to voicemail. Recorded in my phone to this very day is a frantic voice describing a gut-wrenching experience of physical harassment that had taken place on campus property the night before. When I sat down across from this Muslim student, as she described what had occurred the night before, she looked at me and told me that she had come here seeking an education, and now she was afraid to ever step foot back on our campus. And as we finished up the conversation, she looked at me, pain welling up in her eyes, and she asked that same damn question. Why do they hate us? In all the work that I've completed on campus and in my community, I've come to learn that the thing about hatred is, it's almost never about hate, and almost always about fear. And our fears tend to stem from this underlying fear of the unknown. Because when we don't know each other, it becomes very easy to hate one another, to label each other as us or them and forget that we are both human beings. Right now, our news media will tell you that we are living in a divisive America. And when I hear this language, I always start to remember a song that I was taught in grade school. The refrain of the song goes something like this: building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, won't you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. This song reinforced everything I had known to be true about bridge building, because I knew the power of one conversation, and I knew how much it meant to have every voice at the table. But perhaps we need a more culturally relevant example. How many of you caught that phenom of a film, Black Panther, when it debuted just a few weeks ago? Did you catch that revolutionary mid-credit scene? The one in which T'Challa boldly steps before the UN Assembly and states that more connects us than separates us, and that in times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers. When I heard this line, I was like, oh my gosh, bridge building, because I had known it to be true, right? There is power and wisdom in linking ourselves together in times of crisis, and at any time, really. Because if we were able to go about our differences and to acknowledge and accept them, not just tolerate each other, because I don't want us to tolerate. That's lazy. Let's get to know one another so that we can get past those problems and really work on the issues that are actually facing our country together. In order to do so, I believe in the power of bridge building. Now, some of you may have noticed in your programs that this spring, I'll be getting degrees in biology and English, and not in engineering. But to make sure my analogy made sense, I got some friends at the Statler College of Engineering to look it over and ensure that it made structural sense. So, with their stamp of approval, I give you Bridge Building 101. Step 1, survey and calculate. You're standing at the edge of a riverbank, and across from you stands another. How far are you willing to go? How long does your bridge need to stretch? What do you know, and I mean really know, about the person who stands across from you? And here's the harder question. What do you know about yourself? Because to engage with others in conversation, you must know who you are and what you stand for. And to begin the bridge building process, you have to be prepared to meet others where they are. And when you've done so, you're ready for step 2, breaking ground. In 2018, when you walk into a room full of people you've never met, I bet you have one single knee-jerk reaction. You pull out your phone, you pretend to text, maybe fake a phone call, but eventually you've reached that point of saturation where you have to break ground with someone. Because if you don't have a conversation, things are gonna get really awkward. And so what do? We look for the first thing that catches our eye, and then the conversation starts itself. Oh my God, that scarf, I love the color, so pretty. Or, those shoes are awesome, where'd you get them? It's a groundbreaking statement, am I right? But there it is, you've done the thing. You started the conversation, but now you have to sustain it. You've planted the poles, but now it's time for step 3. Assemble the beams of the bridge in pieces. You've began to complement the shoes, but now you have to ask, where have they walked? What stories do they carry? And I want to be very clear that this is not a call to ask people where they are from, at least not aggressively. Because when you are asking where someone's from, aggressively, what you are essentially saying is, I look like I'm from here, you look like you're from there, and now I want us to talk about it. It's an illusion of division already, and we are building bridges of unity, so it's counterproductive. Instead of asking where you are from, we are asking, what is your story? And we're getting to know each other in pieces. And when all that's said and done, you are ready for step 4. Test the strength of what you've built. This is the most critical step in the bridge building analogy. Everything that you've done up until this point is so that you are comfortable enough to have the difficult dialogues that we need. Because it's okay to admit when you don't know. And that's what we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortableness of those conversations. And I'll give you a great example of bridge building. Not too long ago, a non-Muslim student had approached me in our mountain lair, our university's student union. She was bold. She complimented the lace trim of my scarf, and we had a conversation about color and fabric and shopping malls and essentially nothing. It was a conversation about nothing, but that conversation meant everything because it had allowed us to reach a point of comfort where we were laughing and joking, and suddenly we had transitioned to step 4 quickly because I saw this turn in her. She had leaned in closely and she was ready to ask the question. So, why do you wear it on your head? It was a great question because she didn't know, and I did. And we were ready to have that conversation. From this example, I want you guys to remember that it's always okay to say you don't know, because that's how we're forging this bridge, okay? No engineer comes to a path and says, yep, I know exactly where this is gonna go and how far it needs to be built, right? They have to spend time surveying and calculating and breaking ground and assembling before they are ready to test the strength of their bridge. In the America that we live in today, if we want to revitalize the dream that has brought people from all over to our shores, if we want to uphold the promise that is ingrained in our nation, then we have to make an America that we are proud of. And it's difficult to do that and get involved nationally, but it's very easy to start within your own community with one conversation, with one bridge. Thank you.